Okay, so Wolves go away to Crystal Palace tomorrow in a game which could potentially see Wolves move up to fifth in the Premier League table with a win, assuming fixtures go our way. And it's the final game before that dreaded 2 week international break, which nobody wants. But yeah, Crystal Palace, interesting. They're kind of the opposite of us in the fact that they can't really win games, getting a lot of draws. Obviously, they've got the most draws in the Premier League this season with six, whereas we've only got one, which is the second lowest in the Premier League, I believe. And I think they're both kind of fair reflections of points. Expected points has us 15 points, we've got 16, and Palace has 14 and they're on 12. So it's kind of fair reflection. Maybe they should be a bit higher in the league, but us and Crystal Palace are in very similar situations. Obviously, we've got a better squad than Crystal Palace, which is why we're a bit higher in the league. But both had pretty conservative managers who have been at the club for a while and had good success in Nuno and Roy Hodgson. Both kind of taking punts on young managers in Vieiras and Bruno Lage, and they've both kind of had to turn, defensive, low possession sides into ball dominant pressing sides, especially in the case of Vieiras anyway, with the pressing part. And they've both done a good job, and I'll speak about some of Palace's numbers in a minute, but he's doing a really good job of it, and it will be a tough game for Wolves because they kind of match up a lot with Brentford's numbers and some of Leeds' numbers as well. And we saw how he did against them. Before going to some of the stuff about Palace, this would be my lineup. It's not really that interesting. I think this is everyone's lineup. I keep Rain 8 Nuri in there. I don't care if Marcel's got rid of all his injury records and he's on steroids. 8 Nuri's in there. I don't want Marcel in this side until 8 Nuri makes a big mistake. Marcel was pretty consistent bar giving away that penalty at Brentford, but he kept his place until he got injured. I want to see 8 Nuri get that same chance. I don't care if he's a bit younger or he's a bit more rash. I want to see him get that chance. Obviously, you're going to keep Neves and Martino in the midfield too. They were both amazing against Everton. And then Hwang and Trincao have kind of, for me, they've narrowed down those positions locked down those positions. And I don't think either of them you could really drop. Obviously, Trincao's finishing needs to improve. Opposite for Hwang, he's been great. Obviously, you're not going to drop Raul. But going into the game, I think there are some obvious weaknesses with Palace. I think the obvious one is their goalkeeper in Guaita. Obviously, we're kind of opposite ends. Jose Sal's got the third best post-shot expected goals, which people don't know. It's a shot-stopping metric. So, when people say someone's a good shot stopper, it's normally because they've got good post-shot expected goals. Jose Sal's third best in the Premier League. Guaita's third bottom, along with Freddie Woodman and Kasper Schmeichel. So, obviously, that's quite a big weakness for Palace. We should be trying to get shots on Guaita because he's an out-of-form goalkeeper. In terms of shots, Palace quite low. They're third bottom. They're down there with Norwich, who are obviously bottom of the league, and then formerly Nuno's Tottenham. So they're not a heavy shot side. They don't get loads of shots, which isn't that surprising considering how Vieiras is having to turn around that side. But just because you don't have shots doesn't mean you can't score goals. Tottenham don't really have many shots, but they get high quality shots. But we'll speak about that in a minute. In terms of the amount of passes attempted, Palace are in the top 7 in the league, 8th in the league. So although they're not getting shots, they are pretty ball dominant for a team that, last season Palace and Wolves were down here in this bottom bit. So it shows how good of a job Vieiras is doing in terms of, changing the style of play. I'm not saying it's 100% effective or it'll get them a top 10 finish or whatever, but he's doing a good job in turning them into a possession-based side, which is kind of what he did at Nice before it kind of fell off in his third season there. So, in terms of one thing I thought was interesting as well is if you look at the Premier League and the amount of dribblers tackled as a percentage, if you look at the top 3, Leeds are top, who obviously kind of nullified our threat when we played them. Palace is second and we're third. So this could be one of those games that could kind of cancel out. If you look at possession, Wolves and Crystal Palace have very similar possession stats, and both teams have really good dribblers, but also good at stopping them, if you get what I mean. So it could be one of those sides that kind of cancels it out. This could be an argument you could use to maybe play Adama Traore as well, because they are good at stopping dribblers, so maybe you want someone that's a bit kind of elite in that stat, right? And a lot of this is down to their fullbacks, right? Joel Ward and Tarek Mitchell have had really good defensive numbers this season. But for me, even regardless of this, I trust Trincao and I trust Hwang over Adama personally. But something to keep a note of. Now, this is the one thing that does concern me. If you look at pressures in the Premier League, obviously we're kind of low. We don't really do that. That's fine. But Palace are actually top now, which I think is really interesting. Obviously, Leeds are second. And the reason this is concerning is because Brentford were top of this metric when they beat us. and obviously Leeds are second, and they did a pretty good job at us in the second half, even though most of their squad was injured. But also Everton are third, and we actually absolutely mauled them in that first half. But it's been the one kind of common theme this season that we've struggled against sides that have quite high pressing numbers. I wouldn't say Palace are incredible at it. You know, they're a bit low in terms of how many of those are successful. And if you look at the percentage of them that actually work, they're in the bottom four. But they do press a lot, and if it does come off, that could be a concern, because it has undone us a few times this season. But Southampton were also good in this metric. Everton were, and we've kind of dealt with them okay. Albeit I didn't think we were that good against Southampton, but it's something to take into account. Whenever I look at a side when we're about to play them and they're top of kind of the pressure statistics, it always concerns me, because as good as Neves and Moutinho are on their own, it's not the most press resistant midfield. Unlike if we'd have signed Renato Sanchez, but whatever. Again, in terms of possession, Wolves and Palace right in the middle, both kind of average around 51%. So probably this just strikes me as one of those games that'll be really close. Probably not particularly entertaining. Probably why it's not been selected for TV. And it'll be one of those boring games where we'll cancel each other out, and it'll probably be a moment of magic, because both sides kind of pan out very similarly, albeit I'd say we have more quality. And then in the air, again, this one thing that does concern me a little bit. I guess Palace are quite aerially dominant, but we've moved up in this metric recently as well. We were a bit lower down, like about a month ago. But I think, to be fair, this would have concerned me last season when it felt like every corner that would come in, we'd concede. But that's not really been the case this season. We've kind of dealt with that pretty well. So overall, Palace pretty decent on the ball. Their possession numbers are okay. They have a lot of passes. Struggling to have really high quality chances because they don't have a real proper number 10 in there. I know Conor Gallagher's had a really, really good season. Edouard's starting to settle, but none of them have really high creative numbers. It'd be interesting to see if Michael Olise starts. He's kind of someone that profiles a bit more like that. But good on the ball, decent possession side. Probably struggle to create really high quality chances. Good in the air, but have a weak goalkeeper, and ultimately still are in transition and have kind of a weak squad. And the table ultimately reflects that. And if we get a win going into that international break, and in some harder fixtures and then into the January window, this will be an important win because it moves us up to 19 points. You'd assume we beat Norwich and Burnley. That kind of moves you up to 24. And then maybe if you take a couple of points in the harder games, it kind of moves into a nice January window and gives you kind of a nice foundation. But I think we'll probably win this game. I'll go 2-1 in my prediction. I think it'll be an even game against two kind of even sides, but I think we have more quality and we probably will win this game, even though it is away. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Hopefully we'll beat Palace on Saturday. And yeah, peace.